Hey everybody, Fabian for Liberty, FabianForLiberty.com. So I had a question the other day on the radio program. Caller called in saying, how bad will it be in the collapse? And my answer to him was no one knows because we've never experienced what we're about to experience. And if you speak to different people, they'll tell you different degrees of how bad it'll get, right? Electrical grid goes down. It is game over. Now, if it's just another repeat of the Great Depression, 30% plus unemployment, massive inflation, that would be bad. But there would still be markets, there would still be an economy, there would still be companies that prosper, there'll still be asset classes that do well, like gold and silver, like certain parts of real estate. This is what I believe we'll experience. But that's bad. That is rioting in the streets. That is the entitlement class cut off from the food stamps, rioting along with people that have been sold a bag of goods of empty promises, like pensions that they'll never collect on. They might be collecting now, but the reality is they won't collect for long. To show you what an illusion and how things are revealed in the collapse, there's two stories that I want to talk about that show you, because one of the components of a collapse is just not financial. It is the corruption that at the very end of that civilization or that particular empire, the corruption and the fraud and the lying and the scamming of the people hits an all-time high. And that's what these stories illustrate in almost a red alert fashion, because it's not just they're lying to you, it's they're lying to you and they want to kill you. Now, first with the economy, Charles Plauser, who is the president of the Philadelphia Federal Reserve, comes out today and says, Bernanke's QE is probably not going to work. Now, this article, which was the an AP article, the title was Dow drops 100 points after Fed officials warning. And he's just stating the truth. They're calling it a warning. I'm saying, here's somebody that's finally telling people the truth. And the funny quote is by this guy named Jack Alblin, who works from some financial services company. And he goes on to say, quote, so many investors bought into the illusion. And it was like Plauser pulled up the curtain on the Wizard of Oz. Now, I want to know what investors bought into the illusion. I mean, do you know any investors that were like, oh my God, Bernanke's going to do infinity QE, everything's great, low interest rates till 2015, nothing to worry about. I know, because this is I run a private equity firm. I speak to investors all the time. I didn't speak to one investor that said, this is fantastic. And it is this illusion that is propping up the financial markets now. And anything can just boom like that, collapse this thing like a house of cards. In fact, somebody just coming out and saying something, stating the obvious. I mean, QE2, QE1, neither one of those worked. Japan's on QE8, for the love of Pete. It's not working. And for some reason, QE3 saying, probably not going to work. The market drops the most in 3 months. Now, I'll break that down more this week. I can really get into the economy, but I want to get into the big story of the day, which is Russia. And I've been talking about GMO foods for some time. If you remember this French study at the College of Caen, I believe it was, came out talking about how Monsanto genetically modified corn and the weed killer Roundup leads to not only breast cancer, but led to all kinds of other devastating diseases and cancers and huge tumors in these rats. And out of the gate, the Monsanto lobby, the GMO lobby, have been totally just a full-fledged propaganda war against the French scientists, this university, and anybody who says, hey, let's just take a closer look at it. So now they're basically saying, if you want to just research GMO food, and if a study comes out that for 2 years they tracked these rats eating this poison, that somehow that they're being, all of a sudden it's that they're not telling you the truth. The people who ran the test that had peer review, had a bunch of other scientists across Europe study this, receive the results, and they've all said, yeah, we agree, clearly shows You eat the GMO food, you have a higher likelihood of breast cancer and all kinds of other cancers. Forget about the fact cancer rates, autism, all kinds of things are skyrocketing in America just the last 20 years. That's an absolute fact. Sterilization among males, and the list goes on and on. Russia today has suspended the import of American GMO food, which is, and I'm not saying I like Russia or that I like Putin, because I think he's just as corrupt as Obama and the banking cartels that run Obama and that run Putin. But at least somebody is standing up, the country of Russia, and saying, we're not going to allow our citizens to eat this crap and have to deal with the unbelievably painful, devastating consequences of eating GMO food and of the health consequences that come along with it. And going back to the beginning of the article, or the beginning of this video, that in the collapse, you see the fraud, you see the corruption, because yes, many of us that have been awake for a while, we know the revolving door at the FDA, where they basically have Monsanto people working there, then they go work for the FDA, then they leave FDA and they go work for Big Pharma, and how it's almost like this love triangle of biotech like Monsanto, biotech companies like Monsanto, who invented that growth hormone for cows. I forgot the name of it right now. And then sold it to Eli Lilly, one of the big pharmaceutical companies. It shows you this revolving door between big pharma, biotechs like Monsanto, and the FDA, which now the FDA, that's supposed to protect the consumer in America from, they say that organic foods, there's no benefit of eating organic foods. And it's interesting that study came out, or that so-called research paper came out a few weeks ago, saying there's no benefit of eating organic foods that aren't sprayed with chemicals. They're the same as foods that have been genetically modified and that are sprayed with all kinds of chemicals like weed killer. You decide. I'm not even going to, I'm not even going to give you my opinion on that. You decide on what you think is the truth. The revolving door and the corruption and the racket with our government today that claims they're trying to be benevolent and protect you. That's why I don't understand how people on the left that argue against GMO, argue against Big Pharma and Monsanto, it's the government that you think can make everything better that's rubber stamping this, now allows Big Pharma and these nanotechs to basically pay upfront for the review of their products, in essence making Monsanto the client of the government, not we the people that they're supposed to protect. In fact, 40%, estimates are between 35 and 50% of the FDA's budget comes from groups like Monsanto, Merck, GlaxoSmithKline, all of these companies that try to get their poison and vaccines and all kinds of other garbage passed for FDA approval in America. But if you want to drink raw milk and you're an Amish guy, they're going to SWAT team you. Okay, that's the new America. And in the collapse of the West, the immorality, the corruption, the fraud, all of this is revealed. And that's what we're seeing right now. And it's only going to continue to increase. It's only going to continue to become more exponential because they can't hide it anymore. Once the dominoes begin to fall, ladies and gentlemen, they fall big. And it's not just with the economy. It's with all the other lies they've been telling us. Last point I'd make, a perfect example, is what happened with the U.S. ambassador to Libya. They came out the first day, it was this film. We didn't know that they were going to attack the embassy. And then now it was Al-Qaeda. It was planned. They knew 3 days ahead. It is lies. Everything this government, or at least I should say the majority of what this government is telling you, is lying to you. They're lying to you about the dollar. They're lying to you about the economy. They're lying to you about GMO food and the crap that they are pushing on you. They're lying in the media. You make up your own decision. The truth, alternative truth media, though, is the only thing at this point that can save you. And that's not me. That's all of us doing what we can do. And we touched on this on the radio show last night. But there's a lot to just continue to talk about here. Not enough time. Please comment, share these videos. Please subscribe if you enjoy these videos. I'm Fabian for Liberty, FabianForLiberty.com. Thanks for watching. I'm out.